welcome everyone to Eminence TV. I'm Shauna. This is Adam. Adam, introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. I am Adam, better known on the internet as Poppyphobia. That's kind of what I go by. That's my moniker. And I am a caster for Eminence Gaming.
And we're
And
joined today by somebody very special who's going to give us a lot of wonderful insight. Introduce yourself, Reid.
Hi, I'm Reid, aka Sickrobot. I do a lot of things. I don't know what to lead on whenever I'm doing introductions for cEDH. I do a podcast. I play in a lot of tournaments. I play a lot of games. I help manage the database. But probably most importantly for this stream is I would say I have a reputation, I guess, as a pretty political player. So
Yeah.
and have been for a long time. I have a mouth that doesn't quite stop talking almost ever when I'm playing games. So
Fantastic. Yeah, we are talking about politics in cEDH today. This was just something I kind of off the cuff thought of discussing for our first Friday stream, and Adam recommended you read for politics.
yeah,
And
100%.
yeah, and we couldn't talk about any of these things without our sponsors, Moxfield and the Epic Storm. Like that segue, it's pretty good. If you like our content and want to see more content, subscribe to us on Twitch and check out Moxfield. Make a deck on Moxfield. Don't use the other ones. They're much worse. Absolutely much worse. Moxfield is the place to go for deck building, especially cEDH deck building, because the database is built on Moxfield. And I think that it's just the most accessible. And it has this wonderful, amazing feature where you can just import all of the cEDH staples into your deck. I don't know if you guys have used that ability before, but it gives you all of the cEDH staples that are in your colors, and it's kind of nice because I often forget all of them.
I definitely appreciate that feature, although I'm sort of stuck in my ways in terms of deck building where instead of adding or using all the fancy new tools the Moxfield has, I've memorized like the first 50 cards in most of my decks that I end up
Fantastic.
brewing. So it's just like, okay, let's go down the list. Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, etc., etc.
Nice. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/eminencemtg. If you want to pledge to us there, it goes towards our cEDH University that Mike recently started up. Tons of great people and mentors on there, coaching people and people like you on cEDH decks of all different kinds. We have a lot of decks on there, mainly the Krakasakashima decks that are taking over the world, led by Ken. But, you know, there's other stuff on there too. But some important dates, if you guys are free anytime next year, we have Silicon Dynasty in San Jose from the January 13th to 15th, Punt City, March 24th to 26th in Phoenixville, the Cookout July 28th to 30th, and Windmill Slam September 23rd to 25th, also in San Jose. So a little bit everywhere across the entire country. You literally have no excuse to not go to one of them. I think that if you are the type of person who has never gone to a cEDH tournament, these are good places to start. I think that I just kind of went to the far end of competitive EDH when I went to Cash's Cash Card Unlimited tournament, where you pay $300 to possibly win a Jewel Lotus. That's the biggest prize pool I've ever seen. But this is just right in the middle. I think our prize pool is around like maybe $1,200, $1,500 if I'm going off of the previous Punt City. But it is something that's like not too steep on entry and can pay you out pretty well and just give you a really good experience getting into cEDH. And I think cEDH with your kitchen table friends is quite a bit different to tournament cEDH or TEDH because you have to deal with judges and competitive play and people who are trying to win money and who have spent money and have flown to places to play. But all that aside, we have some chaos events that are coming up that we are sponsoring. Proving Grounds is October 22nd. It is a $10 entry and you get like a 16 player. They said something about it was like a rolling 16-player event, but I don't know what that means.
It's
Yeah,
basically going to be
it's
like
like
16 player pods, and they're going to rotate into rounds, and then it's basically like a kind of like a King of the Hill structure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Nice. And then if you want to participate in Chaos 5, I just did Chaos 4 the other day, and it was pretty sick. I got beat to death by a lot of creature heavy decks, but it's still pretty sick. I played against Joda, the new Joda from Dominaria, and that thing is bonkers. But Chaos 5 is on November 5th and is sponsored by Spite Plays and Eminence. So if you want to play, it is free to everyone, not just patrons. Play EDH has some high end max tournaments that are available to patrons, but Chaos tournaments are free. So get in there. That is it for our announcements, and we can move on now to our actual stuff. But Reid, do you consider yourself a political person? I know you do, but how do you describe yourself?
Political person, no. Political CEDH player, yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. If you were to describe yourself as a political Magic player, would you say you are like chaotic neutral, chaotic good? How would you kind of portray yourself in the politics world?
It's a good question. The way that I politic a lot of the time is like not. It depends on like what you consider the axes to be, I guess. If you're like looking at the like politics and cEDH alignment chart, where I'd say I usually don't do that much like overt politicking or like what people like coming from casual would consider to be politics, if that makes sense. Like I don't when I play the game, it doesn't tend to be like here, I'll do this thing if you do that thing, or like deal making, or like explicitly talking through that kind of stuff. I'd say like the way that I politic, and it's sort of just the way that I played the game. But it is definitely what I would consider to be politics. Is more like I don't want to say more subtle, but it's like a bit more subtle than that, and it's a bit more like unintrusive and not as obvious as like classic like again like deal making politicking, where I like it's stuff like, oh, like when this person is going and like walking through their turn and seeing what they're about to do, I'm just going to be talking about what I think they're going to do and what threat it represents to me, and just sort of I'm just going to sort of like put like it's more about like directing people's attention and directing people's thoughts, and sort of just like trying to not like incept stuff into their mind, but sort of just like trying to plant ideas during a game, and sort of like get them to act in like take like lines of play that are closer to like what benefit me, but might not like be necessarily non-beneficial to them. Just be like, yeah, hey, if you like maybe consider this line of play that like might have these benefits for you, and then the unspoken part of that is that it also benefits me. Sure. And like just trying to like
trying to guide your viewer. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, it's like guiding the table's actions. Like it's sort of like invisible hand sort of thing. Sure. Yeah,
I think a rough term to kind of describe that is it's akin with table manipulation, right? You're trying to kind of guide your opponents to do the things that better suit you than maybe it will do that it'll suit them, but you're portraying it as a benefit to them regardless. And I think that a lot of like the high end players or like that top end, those top like consistent players that you see in the top 16, a lot of them have a similar play style to that, where it's diverting threat assessment or trying to push the onus off of them and make sure that other players are utilizing their resources before you have to expend yours. Because it's a game of resources, right?
And a lot of the time, not even just spending their resources before you have to spend yours in a situation where like somebody is going to have to expend resources. But even a lot of the time, like convincing tables to burn resources on things where they might not have used it without a bit of prodding or a bit of pushing. Maybe I need a stacks piece gone. There's an op engine in play. I don't get to play the game because there's an op engine out and my hand is like 3 tutors. But there's another deck at the table that it's like sort of annoying. And I'll present myself as like, yeah, I don't really care about this piece. I have Thrasios Tymna. I'm drawing cards. Like it's sort of, I'm sort of neutral on this, but you might want this gone because like nobody else in the table is really being affected by this. So like, why would you not spend removal on it? And they spend removal on it, and I get to unlock my hand, right? So it's like it's sort of it's trying to use the rest of the table's resources as your own, or get as close to doing that as possible, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of like I hear a lot of players kind of reference like playing your opponent's pieces better than they can, right?
Sure.
Like whether it's dex pieces on the board or the cards that you assume that they have in their hand. Um, so politics in CDH is kind of a rough topic, specifically because like a lot of people are not fond of politics. I think specifically people that aren't used to it, right? So people that come from like 60 card formats, or people that aren't used to a game that involves so much like of the social aspect, or so much talking. When it comes to the existence of politics in CDH, and specifically politics in like tournament CDH, a common concern is that there is no place for political plays. And I was kind of curious on like your stance on that opinion and what you think to people that believe that politics don't belong in Magic.
I think it depends on what those people mean by politics in tournament EDH. Like my initial answer is like, okay, how do you get politics out of cEDH? What, you have everybody communicating through like a preset word system. You're not sitting at a table. You have like blinders over everybody's eyes. You can only look at the board. You can only like, you can't actually directly talk to each other. You have to like text each other, and it has to be like pre-made like text boxes that Wizards of the Coast has given you.
Oh, you
And
mean
then
like
even
arena?
then, and then even, yeah, like exactly, like you have this list of things that you can say at any given point in time. And when it's your priority, you're allowed to put things into the shared chat. And then when it's not your priority, you're not allowed to talk. So like, do we do that? Because like anything less than that, there's still politics, right? And even with that, there's politics, because it's like, okay, so the code word is going to be, I use this response 3 times. That means I don't actually have the thing that I need to use. Or like you're trying to bury all this like subtle communication in a game where like table talk is part of the game. Table talk is required to make the format actually function. So like you can't separate politics from the game. I mean, maybe you can be like, oh, I don't like that like people make like explicit deals in tournaments or whatever. And like, yeah, sure. Like we can have that discussion, but like you can't like politics are like, you can't extract that from the game. That's just part of cEDH. It's part of EDH in general. It's just table talk and everything that comes with table talk.
So like what about that kind of discussion that you alluded to then? So like I do know that deals are kind of something like as a caster, we've had to like cover a lot of games, and a lot of games at like the like really high end of play. And I've seen a lot of deals get made at a table that kind of for the outside viewer looking in, it's like it's hard to understand, right? Like why a decision got made or why something was put on the stack. When you're sitting at a table, do you think that like I don't know, how do you feel like deals get brought about, or what is that conversation like, you know, when it comes to making deals at the table? Because like a lot of people will say like, you know, hey, shut up and put your spells on the stack. And other people will, you know, try to have that conversation. So I'm curious as to like what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what it like, okay, yeah, I guess there's like a couple of things to unpack there. So just like going on like talking about people not really liking deals at like tournament tables. I mean, I get that. I don't think there's like you could never stop 2 other people at the table though from like making a deal and following through on that. Like I just like you can't police that. I'm not sure how much we actually want to get into like the like deeper or like the more topical discussion on that. My opinion on the whole like lying thing or taking deals and then just like not following through on them is the like, personally, I'm just like, yeah, great, you can do that, and then nobody ever makes deals with you again, and then you just sacrifice your win percentage, right? And then like you just, but if the prize pool is high enough that you're just gonna lie and take it, then like great, fine. But like you're never getting a deal again in a game of tournament cEDH where people like are following the community, right? It's like, oh yeah, right, you lied. Great. We now get to lose percentage points because nobody can ever trust you again with this thing. And then we're just gonna move past that and play the game as if we just like can't make those deals with you. Oh, I can stop this if you get my pack back. Nope, I can't stop it because there's no guarantee that you're gonna let me live by like twiddling my crypt and my upkeep so I can pay for my pack. Cool. Fair. We just die. Great. But yeah, I mean, like I don't think deals are that unhealthy. I think that like maybe when people like start to really rely on them and like use like specific like contracts and deals and whatever in game as like their primary political tool, I think that gets sort of like it's not bad on its face. It just becomes tedious and makes those games very unfun to play in terms of like, okay, so now like instead of playing a game of cEDH, we're playing the sub game of we're all trying to lure each other out of these contracts that we set into place to like keep this game going, because like I don't want to use this removal spell. So if you agree to tap down 2 lands in your upkeep and then 1 land in the next upkeep after that, and then let me draw this card after that, I'll use the removal spell here, but otherwise I won't. And then like you're no longer playing a game of cEDH, you're playing a game of like debate the contract, or like try to lawyer this contract for like the next half an hour while you get judges called on you for slow play, and then you take like the action of I'm going to put this cantrip on the stack and then reclaim the next 3 minutes of holding priority so we can keep talking, and then I'll resolve that cantrip and then put another thing on the stack so we can keep talking again for the next 3 minutes. And just, like I don't think there's actually an impact on in terms of like making the games like demonstrably worse. It's just making the experience of like playing the games worse, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and something I think that you brought up that I think is actually like really important to touch on is the idea of slow play, right? I think a lot of that conversation about politics and cEDH and politics at the table derive from people saying like once politics get introduced to the game, right? Because most games start off the same. There's not a lot of talking. People get to like get the feel for the table and how things go, and then as soon as something gets presented or something gets put on the stack where people want to start initiating like priority bullying or things that that they can leverage at the table, all of a sudden like table talk can take a game to time. Or you'll see a lot in top 16 pods or things like that, games lasting 2 hours or 2+ hours because of things like table talk, conversations, and politics. So, I mean, that can be something maybe that some people can interpret as like unhealthy for the format. Same with like in Swiss rounds, if you have shorter round times, like 75-minute rounds or things like that, there's the idea that sometimes politics can take away from that player experience, because a game might only have gone 3 turns around the table, but that's because we couldn't let a spell resolve, right? So I'm curious on like if you think there's a way to improve politics at the table, or a way that you can help players that maybe aren't as good at politics kind of leverage that ability at the table.
So sorry, do we want to talk about like helping people out, or are we talking about like specific like time controls or slow play stuff?
So like I think that we can touch on the slow play stuff first, and then kind of talk about, because I think those kind of segue into each other, because like being quick with your politics kind of is an important skill, I think, to leverage as a player.
Sure. So I actually think that the solution for politics taking up game time and like taking stuff to turns isn't actually a problem with politics or table talk. It's a problem with horrendously bad slow play enforcement in cEDH. Tournament cEDH, like the slow play enforcement is basically non-existent in any format at all, because by the time you get to a point where you realize that you need to call slow play, you then call a judge, and then it takes them 2 minutes to get over while the person is still talking, or people are still talking at the table / still like stalling. Judge gets over, monitors it for like 3 minutes. Unfortunately, a lot of judges are pretty soft on it and just like won't prod the player to move forward with their turn, even when they're taking that long of a time. And then even if they do, it's like, great, I'll like continue playing the rest of this turn with like empty game actions of like, I'll play this rock out of my hand. Okay, I'll think for a bit. All right, I'll play my commander. All right, I'll think for a bit. All right, we'll play this tutor that I was going to play anyway. Okay, we'll think for a bit. And then eventually you lose the judge because the judge needs to go handle something else, and then they're just back to playing slow play, right? So, like, it's sort of this issue with enforcement of, like, making people actually take game actions in reasonable amounts of time, which I'm not sure how we solve that one, but I think probably the answer is some mix of judges' willingness to enforce that in a more heavy-handed manner and a more immediate manner, and then also just coaching the player base to call judges more aggressively. I think the average cEDH player does not call judges nearly enough. I honestly, at this point, whenever I'm playing in IRL events, I expect to call a judge at least once around. Just to, like, a lot of the time, not even because somebody made an error or anything, but just, oh, how does this work? Well, instead of arguing about how this, like, card interactions works for the next 3 minutes, I'm calling a judge, we're getting the answer, and then we're moving on with the game. And I think it's a mix between bad slow play enforcement and just players who aren't willing to call judges or aren't willing to call judges often enough for whatever reason. I think a large part of it is that a lot of people playing cEDH sort of funnel into it from EDH, where you're not really used to playing at a CREL environment, and like the fact that you're almost always calling judges like all the time in like even like 60 card CREL events, just because it's just like a part of the game.
It's interesting to hear you touch on the fact that slow play enforcement is so lax, because for me, in my experience, and it's my experience is little, but
Yep.
getting to that slow play enforcement stage has never happened, never occurred. It seems like if you're the type of person, Adam, the perspective that you're mentioning, where you believe that table talk is harming your cEDH experience, is harming your tournament experience, maybe it's decreasing your win percentage somehow. If you are of that stance, it is then your kind of responsibility to enforce slow play. If you consistently call your judge and you consistently tag the same person or people in your pod for continuing to leave spells in the stack or stretch out the stack because of talking or slow play or whatever, then I'm sure it will get enforced to an extent. A judge will eventually, even just having the judge's presence there can help move the game along in the way that it needs to, because the table then knows that this person is trying to keep the game moving. Maybe they have the best board state, etc., etc. If I don't make my plays brisk, they will call a judge and waste my time, so on and so forth. But it seems like even in like a Cash Cards Limited tournament where they presented 5 points to the winner and 1 point to the draw, obviously that's a very high ratio, the highest I've ever seen. So winning is incentivized. Even in that situation, going for the draw was always a table favorite. The chance of getting 1 point instead of 0 was so huge that any slow play discussion was always allowed, no matter what. I think that the only time I've ever seen someone call anything close to it, a judge was never called, but it was myself and myself and 2 women and 1 male opponent who had Ristic Study on the field since turn 1 and was in a winning position clearly by turn 4. And so it ended up with us 3 discussing probably for upwards of 5 minutes on how to get rid of Consecrated Sphinx or something like that. Or maybe a tax roll that he had resolved. Clearly he was in winning position, and the only comment he made was, like, I can't believe these women aren't letting me play. And not even engaging in any sexist conversation. It's just something that, like, it can be an offhand comment, like, I wish I could play my spells. I wish we can continue. This, how long are we going to talk about this? Does it resolve or not? Just kind of like prodding them into making a decision. That's the farthest I've ever seen it go. So, in terms of harming the overall cEDH experience, I think that's slim to none.
Yeah, I think I'm more so bringing up the topic of conversation because if you're involved in any Twitter discourse at all, these are the types of things that get brought up. Is the idea of like, politics ruins EDH for me or cEDH for me, and it makes games take too long, 2 hour plus games, yada yada yada. And sometimes, like for instance, like from my experience casting, I have seen things that have happened like that, and in certain game pods where a decision was made or something was put on the stack. There's talk for 20 minutes, then a judge gets called, then there's talk again after the judge leaves for another 15 minutes. And like for me personally, I don't mind that because I find myself to be a political player, but I know that in timed rounds, a lot of people would be, like it might leave a bad taste in their mouth. And as a political player, you don't want that, right? You don't want people to despise politics at the table, especially if you leverage that ability a lot when you play. So it's kind of like that balance, finding that balance and where that stuff mixes together is kind of hard. And that's why I'm kind of curious, Reid, on what your experiences are with like speeding up politics, like coercing people to make their game actions, things like that.
Yeah, I think actually a large part of that is So I do think the primary solution is still slow play enforcement, but if you're finding that you are attempting to be a political player or something along those lines, or like you're trying to up your politics game a bit, and then you find that you're getting into like these 15-20 minute debates with the table, and then like you're just getting into like whatever, like a social deadlock, and nothing's going anywhere, but like you're still talking, no game actions are being taken. I actually think that like a relatively good skill is just to sort of know when to cut your losses in terms of politicking. Um, Basically just like if you know you're not getting the result that you want, and like it's just not going to happen, and you can like continue playing the game after the fact, it's just like an unfortunate thing that like maybe doesn't like lose the game on the spot, but it's just like, okay, well, this wasn't the result that I wanted, but it's obvious that I'm not going to get it. Like, just cut your losses and continue playing the game, and sort of just like stop the conversation, because there are a bunch of those types of situations that I've run into where it's like, okay, like a bunch of people are still talking about this. It's obvious that the person who is like casting the spell or is trying to cast the spell or whatever is like, none of this is mattering to the person that's doing that. You just like, it's I find that like a good way to get it to continue going is just to basically cut the rest of the table out of it and just be like, okay, person with the spell that has the thing, just make the play so that we can continue playing this game. So like just sort of dropping it and continuing. And it's also, I think it's also just in general, like just a decent thing to do just to keep goodwill with the table anyway, of just like, yeah, okay, you know what, I'm not going to press it, whatever, like I'm not going to continue like making everybody at this game salty, and then like a lot of the times, even if you end up with the result that you want, you're now the arch enemy of the table because you were just being a complete dick for table talk for the last 20 minutes or 15 minutes trying to get your way, right? So like just understanding that like part of politics is also being like a decent person and not intentionally anchoring the rest of the table or making the rest of the table's game like substantially worse, and just sort of like, yeah, just knowing when to cut your losses, speeding it up. You can also just like, there's a lot of politicking that's just like spending time in between spellcasts or when people are already thinking, and like getting some of the priming for people or just like some of the talking out of the way then, rather than as soon as the thing hits the stack. Like I found that it's like actually pretty efficient to like, if somebody's like taking some time looking through their library for a fetch land or whatever, just like get talking with the table who isn't that person, just being like, okay, if this happens, like or like we might need to be concerned about this, and then if this happens, this is like a possibility or whatever. Not necessarily giving away information for yourself, but just like getting in table talk time during actions that like you can't, that aren't being shortcut or whatever, but you also like, somebody's still taking an action, they still have to finish something, but instead of just like sitting there quiet, you know, getting some talk in.
Like, oh, this blue farm player has 5 mana now, and they are fetching their, second black source. They're probably going to cast a Naz here. Hope you're ready for that. Like, just kind of like getting that conversation primed and going, rather than, oh, there's a Naz on the stack. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which also, like, getting that talking as well. I mean, like, I'm not sure how much we want to get into it now, but, like, I think it's also, like, a very efficient way to do politicking in terms of, like, if you get those discussions in ahead of time, even, like, a turn cycle or, like, half a turn cycle ahead of time, it gives you more time to pick up on reactions from the rest of the table, and it gives you time to pick up on, like, how cold somebody is to certain, like, suggestions or lines of play, or how warm they are to, like, certain suggestions as well, and it'll sort of, like, it gives you a better context for like later on the big political decisions, which are like, okay, I don't have a thing, I'm going to need you to cast that consult in your hand to go get the interaction for this, and then like we won't die, and I will promise you that I won't win on my turn, or like that kind of stuff, right? So it just makes the conversation shorter when you do when you get a lot of it out of the way, like up front.
I think that like, and you can let us know if you want to get into it or not, but like,
sure,
when it comes to like some of the political decisions that you've made in the past, or that you've been known for, and like leveraging like those specific instances that you kind of have been talking about, I know that there's been a few that the community have kind of taken a lot of interest in, I think would be like the nice way to put it.
Sure.
Like specifically the first one that I can think of mine, or technically two instances, because we've I know that I don't think the first one was, but it went over the internet quite quite quickly. But one of them was when I was casting your game in Chaos was the agreed draws during specific games.
That's so IDs are sort of a new one for me in terms of like making an ID after having played the game for a bit. Like I'm no stranger to just like taking IDs with the tables, just like, yeah, we're all better off with the draw, cool. In like later stages and whatever. But yeah, I mean it's just weird because I guess we can talk about both of the ID scenarios. So tier 1 con and chaos. It was chaos, right?
Yeah, chaos 4.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess I'll get the context out of the way for the tier 1 con one first, and that sort of like gives context for what happened at chaos. But so I didn't really intend for the tier 1 con one to end the way that it did, but it sort of did. It's really hard to to get into, but it's like I won't take up too much of the time with the full context for everything, but basically what ended up happening was that we ended up IDing a game, or intentionally drawing a game in the top 16 of tier 1 con, which means that you can't like progress without somebody actually winning a game. So when you intentionally draw in top 16, you just have to play another game after that fact. And I think a lot of the time that's not actually a problem. I think that specifically the tier 1 con scenario was such a rarity in terms of the way that game ended up coming together and the way that the situation worked out, that like I'm not sure taking the draw was even necessarily the 100% correct decision there for everybody that was in that game. And if it's not the 100% the correct decision for everybody in that game to take a draw, I'm not sure there is a situation where it's correct for everybody to take a draw there, just because of how contrived that one was to get together, right? Like it's like, okay, so we know I'm the last person before we're guaranteed to die to somebody, and I actually literally have perfect information of what's in everybody's hands and at the table and in everybody's decks because it was open deck lists. And I know for a fact, like a 100% for a fact, that you can't deal with this, that we're 100% dead on board to the next player, and that I don't have anything in my deck to deal with this aside from going for a win.
It was. I mean, a little bit of context for people listening is that it was a situation where you had the ability to basically decide who won the game, or we could intentionally draw and play again. It was basically like, I can stop you, they can stop you, or I can choose who wins by the interaction in my hand and what I know from you. And if we just intentionally draw, there's no feels bads, and we shuffle up and try again. Yeah,
and it sort of. It actually, hilariously enough, I think that draw actually made that game take less time than it could have if the solution to the game wasn't an agreed draw and was instead politics. And what I mean by that is there is a political end to that game that isn't taking the draw, which is River May Cry. I forget the Najeela player's name. I'm incredibly sorry. The correct political result to that game was River May Cry says, okay, I'm going to stop Sickrobot's win attempt, but you have to give me X number of turns where you do not attack me with Najeela or any warriors, and then we continue playing the game from there, and Sickrobot dies. Or like, you kill Sickrobot with your board, and then you don't attack me with X turns. And then the next 20 minutes is them bidding on how many turns he's willing to give River for River to be okay with countering my win attempt and like leaving the onboard kill in place.
And I think that was Ken's suggestion, right? That kind of blew up on the internet a little bit.
There was a suggestion, but like that one, like again, that one would have taken like another like half hour or whatever. Because again, like you're sitting there in River spot. It's like, okay, exactly how many turns do I want to have of not being attacked by Najeela in order for me to actually consider countering this? And obviously the Najeela player wants to attack and get River dead, so like they're going to be saying like, yeah, I'll give you like 2 turns, and River's never going to accept 2 turns. So like again, they just spend like the next half an hour just haggling over like how many turns he's willing to give up to like continue playing the game. And I think the idea was actually like, while not like maybe not a good solution for the health of the format going forward, was definitely like an efficient one at the time and resulted in like probably the fewest feel bads. And then chaos was just we just messed up the situation. we didn't really remember how Wheel of Misfortune worked, and then we just sort of drew the game because
that one was really funny to Cat because we were watching that and we were like, wait a minute,
what happened?
Yeah, it was basically like it was a Hornfell, right? Like
there was a Grand Abolisher in play. There was a Wheel of Misfortune on the stack with a Harnfell in play, and it was just like, okay, if this resolves and he gets all the cards, he's just winning the game. He's like has 14 cards. He like already had a Breach in exile off the Harnfell. It was like, okay, this is like basically guaranteed to be locked up if he gets to like actually get this Wheel of Misfortune going, or get this Wheel of Misfortune to resolve and like actually get a full wheel. And then it just like the only way to stop it, we thought, was for me to pay my entire life total to stop the wheel from happening. And basically that was just like, okay, I mean, I'll pay my entire life total to stop this wheel from happening, but you guys have to agree to a draw. Except the result was that I didn't actually have to pay my entire life total for that to not work. We just, the Marwyn player had to pay a bunch of life, and then we could continue playing the game. So yeah, that one's my bad.
I mean, I believe it was. I believe that it was Nick who I think presented the draw. Was like, we could just draw if you guys want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, so Nick presented the shortcut. My original thing was like, okay, I won't pressure Nick into trying to take the draw here if I need to kill myself, but like I need assurances from the other two people at the table. And then Nick was just like, yeah, I'll just take the draw if that's what we're doing.